Greetings, beautiful people. I received a special request to talk about depression, so I made a very brief slideshow that's going to go over some basic information. I'll share a poem that I wrote inspired by the topic, and then I'll make some suggestions about some media that you can watch that I think does a really good job of giving you a realistic yet entertaining discussion of mental health. And finally, I'll follow up or close out with some suggestions on various websites that you can go to find out more about this topic. Depression sounds like a sleepless night that just never ends and you're still not rested. It sounds like I need a drink. It sounds like I don't want to get up. Life sucks. Depression is a love song that's on repeat in the background because the lyrics are so painful but so true that you don't care that you haven't showered. You can't remember the last time you smelled the roses. What's the point in planning for the future? Depression hurts. It kills. It's real. It's a movie reel that keeps telling you to press pause on things you once enjoyed, or better yet, turn off the channel to your pathetic life. Depression smells like the meals you skip. It smells like bad breath. Like, the breath that doesn't deserve to be taken. Depression hurts. It kills. It steals. It's real. So in teaching general psychology, I often find that you have to start by debunking some myths and misconceptions. And this holds true for a conversation about understanding psychological disorders. In an old textbook I used to use by John W. Sandrock that was published in 2005, the book was titled Psychology 7, Updated Edition. Sandrock starts off with these 3 common misconceptions or myths, and so I've included them here on the slide. Abnormal behavior is always bizarre. Normal and abnormal behavior are different in kind. And then once people have a mental disorder, they always have it. And you might have heard these myths or misconceptions before. Obviously, there's many more that we could talk about, but for the sake of time, I'm going to just focus on these 3. The first one, abnormal behavior is always bizarre. This simply isn't true. Often, when you think about people who are diagnosed with a mental disorder, it's not so much that the person is completely different. Sorry about that. The truth is, life is a collection of events, a series of chemical reactions coupled with electrical impulses. We're biopsychosocial creatures. Mental and physical health exist on a continuum. Interruptions are bound to happen. So I'm talking about this topic in the context of an introduction to psychology class. So in one of my videos for Introduction to Psychology, I had a request to talk about depression. And when I'm talking about depression, I usually refer to the course textbook that I'm using. One of the textbooks that I use is Psychology in Everyday Life by Reagen Myers and Nathan DeWall. And this book was published in 2020. It's in the 5th edition. And on page 381, they give you this small blurb. So I'm going to read it, and then I'll put it in layman's terms. The DSM-5 classifies major depressive disorder as the presence of at least 2 of the following symptoms over a 2-week period of time. Depressed mood most of the time. Dramatically reduced interest or enjoyment in most activities most of the time. Significant challenges regulating appetite and weight. Significant challenges regulating sleep. Physical agitation or lethargy. Feeling listless or with much less energy. Feeling worthless or feeling unwarranted guilt, problems in thinking, concentrating or making decisions, and thinking repetitively of death and suicide. So the first thing I want to point out is that when we talk about the DSM, we're talking about the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 5th edition. And this is a very big book that is used by mental health professionals. So it's used by psychiatrists and psychologists, counselors, and it includes all of the diagnoses for the various psychological disorders. And major depressive disorder, MDD, is one of the most common diagnoses. So if you were to go see someone and they were to analyze you and figure out whether you had, a depressive disorder, this is the most typical diagnosis. Doesn't mean that it's the only one. All right. And when they're talking about these symptoms, the presence of at least 5 symptoms over a 2-week period, when they talk about changes in sleep and changes in appetite, they're saying you could either sleep a lot or barely sleep. You could either eat a lot or barely eat anything. They're also talking about describing feeling like you have no energy, or like you're on razor's edge, or like your mind is racing. You feel you're unable to concentrate. You don't have an interest in doing the things that used to bring you joy. So hopefully in the poem that I shared in the beginning, you were able to pick up on some of these symptoms. Also on the very last slide, I'll link a poem to a poet that I just stumbled across, who I also think does a good job of describing these symptoms. What you need to know. An estimated 264 million people worldwide live with depression. Think in terms of severity and persistence. In other words, how long has this been going on, and how much is it disrupting your life? Now, I mentioned major depressive disorder, but there are other kinds of depression or other diagnoses. I've listed a few here on the slide. For example, seasonal affective disorder, depressive disorder due to another medical condition, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and persistent depressive disorder. This is just a handful. Okay, so what are my suggestions? I have 3 here on the slide: the biopsychosocial model, seek help, try something, and then learn. And then I've also included the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So in terms of the biopsychosocial model, I prefer this model because it's really addressing the whole person. So the biopsychosocial model is saying that people, humans, that we're multidimensional, we're multifaceted. We experience life in terms of a physical reality, right? We're biological beings. There's also another world, our minds, and then there's the social component. And all 3 of these components are very important, and they're intertwined, they're connected. So if a person is suffering from depression, it makes sense that they're sleeping and their appetite is going to be affected, right? That's kind of the bio side, right? It makes sense that their mind is affected, that they are thinking unclearly, or they have, that they're agitated. And then the social side is often the person will withdraw from social relationships. They start isolating themselves because they feel apart or alone. But if you think about this biopsychosocial model, it also provides a bit or a glimmer of hope, because this means that we can treat or address depression in at least 3 different ways, right? And I mentioned this before. So psychopharmacology, there are tons of different drugs, medications that can be prescribed to help a person feel better. And besides getting a prescription, exercising, eating differently, getting sleep, even being outside in nature, these things can also affect your mood. In terms of the psycho part, of course, I'm a proponent of psychotherapy. I think that talk therapy is awesome. It's the best thing since sliced bread, but that's just me. If you can't afford a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or if you're religious, you might consult your pastor. But if you can't afford a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I also believe that writing is an effective way to organize thoughts in your mind and to record your life. And for me personally, when I write, it brings me a bit of relief. And so I think that writing is a way can be very therapeutic. And there's actually some research to support that. So, the social part, connecting with others. Maybe you don't want to be around a lot of people, but if there's just one person that you can connect with, and if that connection could be something that is face to face or on the phone, or even if it had to be, virtually. But the idea is realizing that we're social beings, and so that in order to thrive, we really have to make connections with others, and that there's a whole science about in order to be your optimal self, you're not going to be an island. So I think the biopsychosocial model provides hope for people suffering from depression and hope for people in general. The second, for seek help, try something new. I would say that I really believe that if you feel like, you listen to this slideshow or you've done your own homework and you're like, wow, that kind of sounds like me, then, maybe you should try something, reach out and, try something different, which is much easier said than done. But you might start small, like keeping a journal, or talking to a friend, opening up to just one trusted person, or if it's very severe, you might try this National Suicide Prevention line and reach out that way. But do something, just something. And then the last thing is to learn more about depression, learn more about psychological disorders in general. And that's my suggestion. Those are my suggestions. Okay, when I was thinking about this topic, I felt like I know I wanted to make the video short, but I still wanted to at least highlight some things that I thought were worthwhile. And in the media, there are tons of examples of really clear, relatively realistic depictions of people who have been suffering from various mental disorders, ranging from anxiety and depression to personality disorders. So I've included my top 5 videos. And It's Okay Not to Be Okay it's a K-drama series that you can find on Netflix. It's released in 2020. And there are several different examples of people diagnosed with various mental illness in this K-drama. The Joker, it's a dark film, kind of hard to watch, but again, it's worth the time. Silver Linings Playbook, published in 2012, K-Pax back in 2001, and Girl Interrupted in 1999. And these are Amira's must-sees mental health in the media. And I bring it up because in the general psychology classes I teach, I usually, when we're having class face-to-face, give students an opportunity to watch a video or a movie, like example, some of these that we have listed here, and then to analyze the characters, identify themes, and then talk about psychological disorders and mental health in the context of what the science says and then what media portrays. And when you can find a match, it's beautiful. But sometimes society downplays or promotes myths. So I like when I can find media that, is close to normal, or close to presenting what it would look like in the real world. Okay, so in the description of this video, I'll include a link to several different websites where you can find out more about psychological disorders and about depression and anxiety. Each of the links are websites that I've visited that I think have information that's easy to digest, easy to understand. I'm also including among the list a couple of other videos that I have to give a shout out to. One is a YouTube video by a poet named Reagen Myers. I don't know her, but she did a poem on button poetry called Depression is Funny Like That. And I think she really describes what depression can look like for some people. My TED Talk in 2020 at TEDx Ocala, Your Voice is More Than Vocalizations. I have to promote that talk because on one level I'm talking about, finding your voice, but I think that part of the problem with depression in particular is that you're feeling suffocated, like you don't have a voice, like you don't matter. And when I say voice, I'm talking about, your unique signature. I'm not just talking about the words that come out of your mouth or the sound that you make. And then there's a short video on Hi, How Are You? And this is a movement that was started several years ago in honor of a young man who was a musician and an artist who was suffering from a psychological disorder. He used that pain to create art, and in Austin, Texas, they decided to honor him, and it kind of turned into this whole movement of, hi, how are you? So there's other links in the description, but I encourage you to follow up for more information.